Hi, I'm Reda with Future Pastimes, and I'm a designer for the expansions to the 2019 edition of the classic Dune board game. In this video, I'm going to talk about strategy tips for playing the Emperor. Now, the Emperor is probably the easiest faction to play and understand, especially in basic Dune. Advanced Emperor has a little more nuance with the Sardaukar forces. But if you're playing Dune and you have a new player joining your game there, it's typically recommended for that player to take the Emperor. And I don't disagree per se, but I also don't see a lot of new players winning the game with Emperor. Now, the reason that the Emperor is so easy to play is the spice income. And in basic, that's your only advantage. So there's nothing else you need to focus on. You're getting the spice that other players pay when they buy treachery cards in the bidding phase. This means that you can usually afford to buy more treachery cards than most of the other factions and still have some spice left over in order to ship your forces to Arrakis. And when you do, you can go after the spice on the board if you wish, or you can also easily ignore it because you have that fairly regular income. But this is also working against newer players, I think, because I think you actually do need to go after the spice on the board, and you also need to be frugal with spending your spice on cards now and then. So in this video, I'm going to talk about what I think any player should be doing when they play Emperor, and this can apply to both basic and advanced Dune. And I'll cover some specifics of the advanced strategy as well. Now let's start with covering everything that the Emperor does and has. Here's the shield showing a brooding Emperor Shaddam IV. Now your 5 leaders are pretty good. You've got a 2 and a couple of 3s from your anonymous soldiers. You've got a Ramsham, he's a 5, and then you've got Hazimir Fenring, who is one of the strongest leaders in the game at 6. Now, on the faction sheet here, it shows you start with your 10 spice, which is great, but none of your forces are on the board, so that's going to cost you. You're also, a free revival is also the worst. It's a 1. And advanced, you can only revive 1 Sardaukar per game turn, something that you'll need to keep in mind when you're deciding what to do with them. Now, for advantages, you only have the 1 in basic right there. You gain spice when other players buy treachery cards. Now, advanced, you have one more advantage, and that is that your 5 starred forces here are your Sardaukar. And these Sardaukar, they count as 2 forces each. But remember, in advanced, forces need spice to count at full strength. So your non-starred regular forces there are only half a point each in battle without spice, and your Sardaukar are only worth 1 point each without spice. So more on that later. Now the advanced advantage for your alliance ability is very powerful. There's 2 things you can do for your allies. One is paying to revive up to 3 forces above and beyond their own revivals, free or otherwise. Thus, if you're allied with the Fremen, they get their 3 forces for free, and then you can pay 6 spice to revive 3 more. Now, that can be a pretty big deal, especially since you're most likely able to afford that extra revival. But the other thing that you can do is an even bigger deal, and that's give spice to your ally whenever, for whatever. This primarily applies to when they're buying treachery cards in the bidding phase. They can bid much higher than anyone else, and if you have the amount of spice that they bid, you're essentially giving them that spice, which they then pay to you. It's free treachery cards, is what it is. Now, you simply have to show the table that you have the amount that was bid, and then the ally gets the card. So, one of the strongest aspects to Emperor is what a fantastic ally they make. But let's start focusing on what you should be doing when you're on your own. Now, you start with a healthy share of spice. You have 10 spice to start with. And in the first turn, you're going to pick up typically quite a bit more as the other players are spending their spice that they start the game with to pick up more treachery cards. But I think you need to be wary of letting Harkonnen, for example, win more than 1 auction in that first turn. Because if they buy 1, they get another one. And this is a faction that can go for a turn 1 victory. And with the right mix of traders, as well as a weapon and a defense, they're going to be very hard to stop. Same thing with the Ixians. They're going to be starting with the best treachery card among all the players, and then they're going to influence what is in each auction. So letting them win a lot of bids is risky too. making a deal with the Atreides and or Ixians with a spice bribe, for example, so that you can gain some card knowledge or help orchestrate the sale of cards is worth entertaining. And since you're an attractive ally, you might, for instance, offer first right of refusal to form an alliance at a nexus of their choosing instead of a spice bribe, or promises not to attack them on turn one, or to share some spice income if you want to go after a spice blow. There's a number of ways to negotiate, even in basic, and you should explore those. Now, because you will have the most spice in the bidding phase, I think that you should try to pick up a couple of treachery cards. Treachery cards are really what's going to make or break you in Dune most of the time. And you want to position yourself to have the best hand possible because it's easier for you than anyone else to do that. And I don't even worry too much about buying lousy cards, especially worthless cards in Advanced, which, if Bene Gesserit in a game, they get to use those as Karama cards. So if you're not buying them, you should at least make them bid more to get them. Now, what you get in that first auction will really color your moves in the shipping and movement phase. If you do pick up worthless cards, for example, you should think about picking a fight with a small number of your forces just so that you can make room in your hand by getting rid of them for the next turn in the auction phase. Play special cards early and often if you can, so you can constantly get new cards. And go after a spice blow instead of a stronghold so that the other players are having to risk forces as well. Or stronghold block. Try not to sacrifice too many forces, though, because your free revival stinks. Yes, you can afford to pay for more, but don't make a habit of it. Now, the reason I think you need to go aggressively after spice blows is because you want to keep the other factions poor, or they have to risk forces or lose forces in order to win those fights. And then you want to make sure that you're winning auctions without having to overpay so much if you're getting that spice income. Some players will say go after Habanya Siege with your first turn. It's not a terrible idea since it's the hardest stronghold to get to on the map, all things being equal. But in advance, I would suggest actually putting a good number of forces and some Sardaukar into Tuix instead. The guild will most likely take their turn last, which lets them move out instead of fighting you, because they're probably only going to have one treachery card, and their leaders are weaker than yours. So a confrontation with you is almost never in their best interest. And then you'll get that one spice income in collection, which you want, again, deprive anyone else of. But when deciding where to go, you want to take into account what spice blows you can get to, whether or not you need to block a stronghold or to prevent a win. And sometimes you're just biding your time till you get a good hand or a nexus. If you can cultivate a powerful hand of cards, then you can more seriously consider the solo win. Until then, start thinking about who you want as an ally, based not only on their presence on the map, but on who can best take advantage of your wealth. Be cautious of someone who will take advantage of you to fill their hand and then break the alliance at the next possible nexus. So just, don't be too eager to share information on safe leaders or traders, as well as the content of your hand, unless you feel there's little chance of your ally leaving you, at least anytime soon. Now let's talk a little bit about the advanced game elements. You have your balance. You have to balance your wealth with the buying cards, shipping, spice dialing. Your Sardaukar forces are extremely useful. First, they're a great deterrent. No one is eager to battle you in a stronghold where you say have 5 normal forces and 2 or 3 Sardaukar there as well. That's a potential 9 to 11 strength right there, with only a fraction of your overall force strength. So always keep 1 or more Sardaukar mixed in with your normal forces. You also make sure you have to have a little bit of spice set aside to allow you to dial that high. So the spice, again, much more useful. You got to keep some of it and get it. Your handicap, though, is with the Fremen. Once, they never need to spice dial, and 2, your Sardaukar only count as normal forces against them. So try avoiding to fight them as much as possible. But I also wouldn't discount them as allies. Everyone kind of skips over them. They want to gravitate to the Bene Gesserit with the voice or to the Atreides with their prescience. But yet, consider them, sure. But take into account the map positioning of the players. Are they already in 1 or more strongholds and with a strong presence? And their hand composition. Can they, win a lot of cards in the next auction, depriving the other factions of getting most or all of them? Fremen, they're usually lurking by a couple of strongholds with a large force, and they typically only have 1 or 2 cards. So between you can strong-arm your way to victory by having two groups of, large groups of forces able to outdial your opponents, even if your leaders are killed. That's a great reason to have the Fremen as an ally. Of course, this can be accomplished with just about any ally. So think ahead before a Nexus and work towards positioning your forces and your hand of cards so that you can strike as soon as the conditions are right. And that's generally it for the Emperor. So let me know what your strategies are that you tend to employ with this faction. And let me know any noteworthy victories or defeats that you have experienced while playing with the Emperor. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.